Hello, everybody. Welcome to another That Word Chat. So excited that we're get to talk once again about dictionaries. I apologize if ever anybody is sick of talking about dictionaries. It's such a great topic. I love it um, so much, and I love what dictionaries have to say about the culture and the wider world. And we have a guest who's going to tell us about sort of the grand collection of dictionaries. I don't know how many dictionaries, if you would ask me how many dictionaries exist, I don't know if I would have said 20,000 plus, but but Michael Adams is one of the curators of a collection, the Madeline Kripke collection of dictionaries. She was a collector. She was I suppose you would say an amateur lexicographer. I don't know if any lexicographers really are anything but amateur, but in a way, I mean they get paid for it, but it's not like there are too many schools, there are too many school programs that give you lexicography as your PhD. But Michael Adams is past president of the American Dialect Society, former editor of American Speech, past president and fellow of the Dictionary Society of North America, and former editor of the Journal of Dictionaries. He's provost professor of English and named professor at Indiana University in Bloomington, which is where this amazing collection of dictionaries is found. So he's also has some background himself in slang, which is a major part of the Kripke collection. He's wrote Slayer Slang, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer lexicon, Slang the People's Poetry, and this one's interesting, In Praise of Profanity, 2016. So welcome to the show, Michael. Great to have you. And we start out on mute, so
I was trying to be a good
there you go.
citizen. I usually forget to
Yeah.
turn the mute off and just sit here. And then when you said, be muted, I thought I should do that. And then I went off and I did it, and then I was inaudible all of a sudden. No, I'm
I,
very excited to be here and I'm ready to go. So
all right.
let's discuss.
All right, yeah, let's start. I mean, background. If you haven't followed the links in the on the website or the emails, let's start. I had heard of this collection briefly. I actually literally was in conversation with two lexicographers who offhandedly mentioned this, probably in the teens. And then, of course, I heard all about it when Madeline Kripke died of COVID in 2020, 2021. But anyway, tell us what is this collection of dictionaries?
It's a remarkable collection overall, and dictionaries are really just part of it. But dictionaries and language books constitute, say, 20,000 volumes in the collection. So it isn't 20,000 dictionaries exactly. It includes grammars of languages, and it includes books that I think you'd consider allied to the lexicography she loved. Let me give you an example of that. There is a long-standing myth, and it really is a language myth that some people hold, that a lot of slang comes from Roma, the language of travelers, who used to
Oh,
be called gypsies, but we don't use that word anymore because it's a
hmm.
pejorative word. And uh, she would collect books about the Roma culture as well as the Roma language that were ancillary to the dictionaries that she collected. So she was always interested not just in the books, but in the people who spoke what was in the books. And she preferred people who lived on the margins to people who lived in the center of things. Though I have to say, and we can talk about this, we can talk about this at all scales of detail. She collected big, famous dictionaries in excellent copies that would have pleased lots of collectors. And she collected a lot of scruffy little dictionaries that mattered to people and have the evidence of their mattering in them. Maybe somebody wrote in them, maybe somebody signed it, maybe it was a gift to someone. All of that was stuff that attracted her when she was collecting. So I would, I mean, again, who knows even where to start? And forgive me because I've been starting on this subject for a couple of years now. I ought to know my way better. But she, it's so much stuff, and she was such a thoughtful collector that it's usual that there's something a little special, or sometimes a lot special about the book that she collected in the end. So not just any copy of a book, and not always the prettiest copy of a book, but the copy of the book that has the signature of the author given to a friend who had a role in history that we can identify. Those types of associations were very attractive for her. So,
Right.
if I'm among the collection, and I'm going to correct Mark about something in a minute, but if I'm among the collection, and I'm looking around, if I see a dictionary that looks like, maybe I wouldn't want it on my shelf. I assume that nonetheless there's something interesting about that dictionary that I'm supposed to discover when I look at it carefully. What I correct Mark on is I'm not a curator of the collection. And
Oh.
that actually is a problem for an event like this one, because Mark very reasonably asked, will you have things to show us? And the answer is no. I have as many things to show you as you would have to show me about the collection, because though I work in it, and though I helped to bring it to the university, and though I curated the exhibition that's up right now, I'm actually I'm not a staff librarian. I'm not associated with the libraries as an employee, and I have limited access to the materials. And yes, they're very generous with me, and yes, I'm part of the team. But if I'm looking at books from that collection or anything in the Lilly Library, I have to be in the reading room or supervised by a librarian, just like anybody else. So it limits my access to the material, basically, on
Mm.
like today.
So,
Um,
so you said so the distinction is you're curator of this exhibit that's going on now,
right.
but the collection is of course bigger than the exhibit. So
Yeah, yeah.
tell us about the exhibit.
The exhibit has about 140 items in it. And again, every time I say that, or I look at the number of books we've talked about in the blog so far, I think, what a scratch on the surface of this collection.
Mm.
140 out of 20,000 is barely anything. And it's not exactly representative even, but
Mm.
it does represent some themes of her collecting. There are early English dictionaries. There's a lot of 19th century lexicography in all languages represented, which is great, not just to show what dictionaries were like then, but they're part of the developing science of language, if you want to call it that, that
Mm.
ends up as linguistics in the 20th century. And so they were instruments of learning about languages in structural ways that people hadn't had the advantage of before. She collected a
Mm.
lot of slang, and a lot of obscenity. She also loved true crime, by the way, and was big on obscene cartoons. So one of these days, there will be an exhibition of her collection of what are called eight pagers, or Tijuana Bibles, which were supposedly published in Mexico because they couldn't be published in the States because of the Comstock Act, before the 1950s.
Mm.
And she just loved this stuff, and she worked very hard to collect as many of them as she could. We don't have any of that stuff on display. We just stuck with the dictionaries in this case.
Mm.
One of the cases we have is called Dictionaries in Everyday Life, and that's a weird title for a case. There's too much different stuff in there, but it's really about those little dictionaries that people picked up along the way, not the big dictionaries that some person with money, for instance, would have in a library at home, or that a scholar would have because it was important to a certain type of research. Just dictionaries like I don't know, Heather, if you've got access to the blog, can you find one that'll be fairly early on that's got a picture of a pink covered dictionary and it says dig this dictionary at the top? If we could show people that picture, it gives a sense of the sort of thing we're talking about. It's one of two, I think, we've got in the blog that really show this dictionary as an everyday life idea.
Huh. So what was the title of it?
I'm not sure that it has a title, but the cover
Oh,
just says "Dig
can
this
you
dictionary,"
dig
and
this
I forget
dictionary?
what I titled the post, so I can't help you with that. But it would have been fairly early on, maybe number 8. So the blog is organized backwards. The most recent entries are the ones that come up on top. So this would be pretty close to the beginning.
Okay. Well,
And and, and,
yeah, Heather,
and
will
so I'll give
find
you
that.
another example of another. Oh, okay, dig this dictionary. Now you can see it. So this is my when we were selecting things for the exhibit, I tried not to duplicate the blog, but this particular dictionary for some reason means so much to me. I think actually meant a lot to Madeline too, for a reason I'll tell you in a minute, that I thought it ought to be included. So what it is a not very good dictionary that was made on contract by Merriam-Webster. I think maybe between the First and Second World Wars. It was a serviceman's dictionary. It was pocket-sized, and it was at the front. And it did its job, but not very well. And it was acquired by a company, if I'm remembering correctly, they licensed it, called General Products in New Jersey, naturally. I hope I didn't offend anybody by saying that. But it's just one of those agglomerating companies that buys a lot of stuff and then resells it, remarkets it in a new and commercially appealing way. And so they weren't really interested in the dictionary. They were interested in selling it to young people because it's a dictionary of the late 1950s when teen culture is rising in its influence, and selling things to teens is increasingly important and lucrative to companies. So General Products was all over that. And they licensed this dictionary so that they could put this pink plastic cover on it. And this cover is like an infant book cover. It's a puffy
Huh.
plastic cover. And you see the young lady there. She's clearly delighted at the dictionary she's looking through. I've never seen anybody happier, in fact. This blue and pink combination, I have learned, was a color combination used a lot in products for teen girls at the time. It was the pink blue aesthetic. That's what my teenage daughter would call it. She would say that it signified an aesthetic. And besides sitting on Webster's dictionary there, you've got dig these definitions, which I think is a great way to present a dictionary. And it's just a shame that the dictionary isn't better than it is. And someone later, as you can see, looked at it and mentions the ponytail down at the bottom. I don't know what
Oh,
that
yeah, I
means.
was wondering why that was
I
written
don't
in
know why
cursive, the
anybody
word
wrote that there.
ponytail. Yeah.
But I think it's such a great book. And now, one, it's important to Madeline because it's with quotation marks around it, Madeline's dictionary. No, it wasn't really. She was a pretty intellectual kid, but it's from exactly her era, right? So she would have seen it as something that represented her as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And so she collected it, but she also collected it for the perverse reason uh, that makes sense to collectors, but not to readers, that you do judge a book by its cover. The cover is what's interesting, the way the idea of the dictionary is marketed to just, folks who'll pick it up and put it inside their purse or their backpack or whatever and feel cool for having it, right? So it's unbelievably a dictionary that's playing to the cool factor in the late 1950s, right? And that's a dictionary in everyday life. Another thing we've got in that case that's also on the blog is Madeline had collected, I think, 7 printings. They're really different editions of Cab Calloway's
Oh, yeah.
catalog, as he called it, which was a little booklet of African American music-related slang
Mm-hmm.
of his period. And he did it to celebrate the language of the culture, for sure. But one of the things that Madeline might have been collecting for that she couldn't finish is that they were used to market Cab Calloway's shows. So the back cover is actually an advertisement for a show that's going to occur in a particular city at a particular time. So
Mm.
this is pre-marketing. These things were dropped on a city, Omaha, Nebraska, let's say, before Cab Calloway and his band got there. And then everybody would know about the event because they had picked up a copy somehow or it had been presented to them of this little, in the end, I think it was maybe 24 pages At the beginning, it was more like 12 pages long, and it was popular in itself. So Cab Calloway kept expanding it a little bit. There are pages in the back for notes and memoranda and things like that, to bulk out the booklet a little bit so that it could be taken seriously. And again, this stuff just came to people, and they did what people do with such things. They stuck them in the backs of drawers or in boxes up in the attic, and eventually those ended up at a book fair somewhere or even in a rummage sale. And Madeline was right on top of it and picked it up. It would have been wonderful had she managed over another 10 years to collect, say, 15, 20 more of those to demonstrate the nationwide reach of that vocabulary at the time, which is really, I think most people will say that that little dictionary is the first dictionary of Black language in America. And so it's pioneering, and it's cultural and commercial, and it's business. And so we say dictionaries in everyday life.
So do you have and actually there's a great image of that. So let me just share a screen really quick.
One of the things about it too, everybody, is that it lasted long enough that Cab Calloway's representation of himself changed significantly over the run of things. So there's one that I think is the very first. But you see, we did cleverly. Look at how smart we were. We put the back of the thing up too, so that you can see that it's Wednesday night, August 3rd. You better get an advance ticket. And in the meantime, here's a little gift for you, Cab Calloway's catalog.
Interesting. I did not know that about. I mean, I was familiar with the Hipster's Dictionary, but I had no idea that it was a marketing thing. But of course, it makes.
Yeah, well, neither did I. I mean, I like to pretend and present myself as knowing a whole lot of stuff, but the truth is, I only know that stuff because I've got my nose buried in collections like this and learn about it, and it's why I'm happy to share it. Is who would know? Who would guess?
Well, let me go to a sort of maybe a deep question, and this is so you have a familiarity before this collection with slang, with I assume the Buffy the Vampire Slayer lexicon is presented as a dictionary.
2/3 of it is a dictionary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You've created a dictionary of this ilk, but then you got into this collection and got to look through it and write about it and think about it. And how has that changed your sort of view on, has it changed your view on slang, about language, about how it reflects the culture, anything like that?
I'm not sure that it's changed my view of slang very much. It certainly taught me about language and culture in ways I wouldn't have expected. And I just gave you some examples of it. Another thing that I barely knew about, I caught on to it after we got in the collection, I think, but before I'd ever had a chance to look into it. I think we'd purchased it by then, but maybe it was in transit, which took actually quite a long time. Imagine packing all of those books in a safe way and getting them onto 2 semi-trailers to bring them from Madeline's apartment and her storage units in Greenwich Village all the way to little Bloomington, Indiana. It struck me as amazing the degree to which dictionaries were used as commercial gifts. And what I mean is that, so my mother's father was a barber. He was a village barber in Lawton, Michigan. And when you went into a barber shop at that time and you looked at the wall, there was almost always a calendar from the wall company, by which I mean WAHL, or I forget the name of the green alcoholic liquid that was used to, there was a picture of a gentleman with a stick on it. I don't think any of my grandfather's clients had walking sticks. They were all farmers from Van Buren County. But you go in there, and that was the way the supplier rewarded the purchaser at the end of the year, looking forward to a new year of business relations. You'd get that calendar and you'd put it up. Little did I know that you could also get a dictionary. So let me give you a couple of examples. There was a place, I don't know if it's still there, a bagel place in Los Angeles area town. I'm not from California. I don't know the names of these towns. And it's a fold out. It's not a bound book, but it's a fold out that's a glossary of Yiddish terms. And I thought to myself, well, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you're in Southern California and you're pretending to have a deli with bagels that are like New York bagels, you would want to establish your credibility as a bagel purveyor, right? What better way to do this? And look, you could put together a bound volume, but if you just ran it off as this sort of eightfold item, you can stick them in every bag that goes out the door. And then they're around your house, and people are thinking not only about your bagels, but they're thinking about Yiddish, which they had not been doing before they saw the thing, right, that came from the bagel store. In the early part of the 20th century, believe it or not, if you bought your kid's shoes to begin the school year, you almost always ended up with a dictionary along with your shoe purchase. I didn't know this. Buster Brown did this, and all kinds of shoe companies did this. They had, and this is perfect for the dictionary making companies. And by the way, it still goes on. If you have a special interest or an organization, you could do it yourself. You go to Merriam-Webster and you say, I would like a sort of standard dictionary that goes to the members of this group, or whatever it is, or all of my customers, or it's the 100th anniversary of our organization or company. We want to present everybody with a Merriam-Webster dictionary, special binding, special title page, other special things that get inserted into what for the lexicographer is already written, right? And then that stuff gets printed and it gets sold as a Merriam-Webster dictionary, but privately, just to the company. And that brings in revenue to the lexicographical enterprise, but it also gives something to the interested party to give away to somebody else, right? So think of it. I mean, those shoe companies were not just supporting kids' educations; they were supporting their arches, right?
Yeah.
Both at the same time, right?
So you're saying this still goes on? This is still a thing? I mean, I would think it'd be expensive to print something.
No, it would be, and you probably wouldn't do it for a sort of, mom and pop thing. My grandfather certainly wasn't going to order a bunch of dictionaries to give to the farmers out in Van Buren County, not because they weren't literate people, but because they didn't have a whole lot of money to spend on dictionaries, and he didn't have any money to spend on them either. If you had a company of a certain size, yeah, sure, you could pull it off. Because in the end, what is it? It's a $40 gift to every employee of the company. You could give them a T-shirt that had the company's name on it, or a mug, but everybody's got T-shirts and mugs. What if they had a special dictionary? See, well, I'm selling it right now, and I've got nothing to gain.
I'm inspired to go collect these. I mean, I think what a great collection that would be to find all these.
They are out there. And again, those are the things that people have got that they don't know they have. But Madeline, she's not the only one. I know a couple of other collectors who've picked up on this too. But she really realized that this was always going on, and collected as many of these little commercially motivated dictionaries as she could.
Okay. All right, I want to get to questions from the room before we get too far ahead.
Yeah.
I think we have two, and I think maybe they're both people who can't come on camera.
Yes, I will ask on behalf, but first I can tell you that I found two Buster Brown dictionaries online. So if you're in the market, they're out there.
Wow.
So the first question, Michael, is what are the challenges with housing and displaying such a collection?
Oh, it's just awful, and you won't like you won't like all of the answer, but some of it is good. A library like Indiana University's, even with as large a building as the Lilly Library has, cannot store all of its books and materials in the libraries you enter. A lot of the items are stored. If they aren't used very frequently, they're stored, and then somebody can call them up from that facility. Unfortunately, looked at one way, pretty much everything in the Kripke collection is in storage, and will be for a while. And this is why. You know, 20,000 books, only 36 blog posts, maybe 42 items covered in them. Why, Michael? Why not more? Right? The answer is we don't really know what's in the collection yet. We're developing an inventory that's about 2/3 of the way through the 20,000 books or thereabouts that we know of, which means that a third of the collection is still terra incognita. We don't even know what those books are. We'll get there sooner or later. Those books are in the Wells Library, which is the general library, in a storage room on the 10th floor. But and this may surprise you, but it's true. When a big collection like this comes in, the university does not immediately hire 100 people to process the collection. The university stores it, and it gets cataloged, prepared and cataloged incrementally. And sometimes, maybe at this stage, most often for the Kripke collection, a book will be brought out of storage and cataloged if we know where to find it because of the inventory so far. And it will be cataloged so that someone can look at it. So for a while, it's really people's interest that drives the cataloging. There was a little spate when catalogers regularly employed in the library went through a bunch of 20th century books. If any of you are librarians or use libraries a lot, you'll immediately know why this is the case. They were low-hanging fruit because the Library of Congress has records already prepared for those books. And all the librarians are doing when they're cataloging, I shouldn't say all, but primarily they're connecting their record from the library to the Library of Congress record. And that's one of the major steps in the cataloging. So it made sense one summer just to have them go through a bunch of those books and very quickly get them cataloged and available for people. But when you're thinking, gosh, I wonder if there are any great early 17th century bilingual dictionaries, you're going to have to ask that question. We're going to have to look in the inventory. We're going to have to identify the boxes. I can almost guarantee that the boxes we need are at the bottoms of piles of boxes. They're not big piles because that would hurt the books, right? But they'll be the third box down, close to the floor. And we'll drag that out, that box, and we'll recover the item, and then we'll catalog that, and then it would be available to somebody in the reading room. It will take forever to catalog the whole thing. And right now, the inventorying is done by people like me or the retired director of the library, Breon Mitchell, in our spare time. And of course, I don't know what the rules are for Breon, but it means that I have to have a librarian in the room with me while I am inventorying the books because, I'm not a librarian and don't have access to them otherwise. So it's a slow process. It's partly motivated by people's desires and needs. And the worst thing of it for Indiana now, the Lilly Library, and I don't want to get off the topic of the Kripke collection necessarily, but it's not our only major dictionary collection. Breon Mitchell, whom I just mentioned, has a very large collection of bilingual dictionaries. Many of them are really fascinating because they're missionary dictionaries or glossaries. Somebody goes off to an island in the Pacific and there is an indigenous language and they put together a dictionary of that language with English equivalents, and the motive was to Christianize the people who were there. That's the type of thing that Westerners did in the 19th century, probably still do today. And we also have 9 tons of material from the Barnhart family. And if you know your dictionaries, Clarence Barnhart, many people will consider the most important American lexicographer of the 20th century. He was a freelancer for most of his life and contracted with other companies to make dictionaries. And he and his sons, Robert and David, were also lexicographers, and so was Robert's wife, and Cynthia. And over the years, they made a lot of dictionaries, and they kept a lot of records. And we have no capacity to deal with processing that collection at the moment, which includes not just archives like correspondence, which is pretty easily handled, but all of their citation files, which include not just things that they discovered as evidence of language use, but the slips that they bought from the Dictionary of American English project from the University of Chicago Press, which included the Oxford English Dictionary's American evidence that wasn't used in the first edition of the Oxford English Dictionary. So when you're looking at the Barnhart collection, you want to call it that way, some of those tons are just the raw data from which all their dictionaries were made, but it's evidence from a lot of different sources that also, in a way, charts the history of the development of lexicography. So one of these days, we'll want to know more about the business of making dictionaries. That'll be the collection in which we find the evidence, because they worked with all these different publishers, and they've not just got the letters, but they've got the carvings, and they've got the financial statements, and they've got everything that tells you how the sausage was made on paper in the 20th century. So anyway, I mean, our problem is certainly the Kripke collection. How will we process that and make it available? It's that we've got all these other collections that we also want to make available that we're finding it difficult to do. So be patient with us, and until I die, I'll just work on them as much as I can and get as much of the stuff available. Now, the good news is, and this is one of the reasons that Saul Kripke, who is the administrator of Madeline Kripke's estate, her brother, a very famous philosopher, if you're a philosophy person, you probably know his name. One of the reasons I think Indiana appealed to him as a destination was that we are a public institution that provides public access. So you don't have to be a university professor asking to look at a dictionary. You can be anybody off the streets. You just walk in, you register as a patron, and get your driver's license number in case they have to come after you because you stole something. But otherwise, it's pretty easy. If you give them fair warning, then they can find the book and they can get it cataloged, and they can bring it to you so that you can look at it. That would be true of any of you, true for me, true for a scholar somewhere else. So I don't say all of this so that it's daunting. I just say it because it's true. And no, you can't just walk in and say, I want to look at the first 100 books, because we won't know where those are, and we won't know how to get them to you fast enough without warning.
Well, that's good to know, because I plan to make the pilgrimage this summer before it goes till July 25th.
Something like that. Yeah, that's right. Pretty much till the end of July, the exhibition will be up. I'm already talking about the next exhibition, though.
What will that be?
The librarian I was talking to rolled her eyes when I said this, but I said, why don't we do one about hobos and travelers? Because she had a very large hobo tramp traveler collection. It would make a nice compact little exhibition of something that really mattered to her and stuff that people don't usually see.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did have the question, why Bloomington, that what appealed because you wouldn't think, because she was in Manhattan, the collection was in Manhattan. She had apparently much of it or most of it was in her apartment, and then she had some stored, and apparently made no plans for what would happen to it. And so, was there was there any drama there, or was there competition for this?
There was a little of both, actually, and I will recommend, because I know that he's already chatted with you. Stefan Fatsis, in his book Unabridged, has a chapter that talks about the collection and how it got to Bloomington. And I'll say, in ways he knows more than I do. He came to open up the exhibition. We had a symposium connected to the exhibition, and he came to do a Q&A event on the first evening. We were talking about something, and I was talking about something. He interrupted me and said, "Michael, that's not quite accurate. Let the journalist give the facts." Right. And then he gave them. And I thought, that is not quite the way I remembered it, but he's right. So I would say, first, go and read that chapter in Stefan's book. But this is what happened. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't mean to disparage the recently deceased Saul Kripke. Was an important lexicographer. He wasn't always the nicest person, nor did he and Madeline get along particularly well. I know that they loved each other. And I know from friends of Madeline's that she could defame Saul up and down every day. But if anybody else decided to criticize him, they were in for an earful, because she didn't put up with that nonsense from anybody. He was criticizable, but only by her. We'll be looking at it. So, and I think that Saul felt the same way, but Saul didn't know what to do with all of this stuff. So he called together a group of her dictionary people, her dictionary friends, and you would recognize some of them because they too have been on your chat in the past. Jesse Scheidlauer, Ben Zimmer was not one of the people there. Jonathan Green, the author of Green's Dictionary of Slang.
Have not had him yet.
And a couple of other people. And we met with Saul and talked about it. And there was a big risk, and it was a real risk. If his nieces and nephews, or I guess they would have, yeah, I guess nieces and nephews at that time, had pushed it, they might have convinced him to sell it off by lot in auction, because they would get money for it. They would get a lot more money that way than they would, they thought, maybe selling it to a university. But we were in a conversation one day, and I started to put the pieces together. Appraising a collection is really difficult. And it's more difficult now than it was even 15 years ago. The IRS insists that there be a photograph of each item, that there be comparators identified in the market with prices, because there aren't always comparators for Madeline's stuff. That's a problem of appraisal. What's the value of this dictionary thing that we're looking at? If nobody's ever bought one and the cost isn't recorded somewhere, it's valueless as far as the IRS is concerned. When you've got 20,000 books, it takes a long time to do that type of an appraisal. It takes longer than the IRS will wait, and it takes longer than New York probate will allow. And when I heard those things, I put two and two together and realized maybe fire sale was the wrong word to use, but it might be possible for the Lilly Library to acquire a collection like that on the terms it would have to be given, because there wasn't time to appraise it for sale. So I went to the director of the Lilly Library, Joel Silver, and asked him if he was interested. And it just happened that we'd had a bicentennial fundraising spree for a decade. It just happened that somebody had given the Lilly $1 million to acquire a collection.
Oh.
And it just happened in the end that we were able to get the cost of acquiring the collection and the packing and shipping under that $1 million mark. And if you want the actual number, you can find it in Stefan's chapter. It was actually, I consider it a real deal in the end. And I think that the library does too. But there was that drama. And then there were two other items of drama. And I feel bad about one of them. I am a 3-time University of Michigan alum. Believe deeply in the University of Michigan. One of my best friends, Richard W. Bailey, was a professor there. He predeceased Madeline. He and Madeline were very good friends. I suspect one of these days we may actually find a piece of paper that suggests that Madeline intended to give the collection to Michigan. But nobody could produce that paper. And Michigan made a big mistake in my understanding. This was communicated to me by Saul and his assistant, not by the University of Michigan. But their version of the story was that Michigan called him upon hearing of Madeline's death and asked to know when they were going to get their collection. And Saul found that very insulting and decided they weren't going to get it at all, which is, a shame for Michigan, but pretty good for Indiana. Another competitor was Stanford. And I think there, even though you can go into Stanford's library as an ordinary citizen, I think that the idea was that Stanford was looking to cherry pick the collection and not to represent it over time in its fullness. And what I'll give Saul, I think it's so important, is that he knew that this was Madeline's life work and legacy. And he agreed with her dictionary friends that it must be held somewhere as a collection rather than broken up. Then it was a question of where that collection could go. And we just happened to be in the right place at the right time under the right conditions. So we got it. Yeah.
You mentioned her dictionary friends. I know there's this community of lexicographers. If you're a lexicographer, you probably know all the other lexicographers.
There aren't that
Uh,
many of us. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, famously, you know, Jesse Scheidlauer had everyone over for a movie one day, and you know, this person was there and that person was there.
Yeah.
We talked about that on a previous show. But anyway, was there a lot of interest in the community when she died, and a lot of concern about what would happen to the collection? And was that part of sort of convincing the family where to send it?
It
Yeah.
absolutely was. I mean, we were there in a Zoom room because COVID had already started, obviously. We were in a Zoom room with Saul and his assistant, Romina Padro. And, you know, he was asking those questions, and people were speaking for themselves, but also, as you're suggesting, for the community of dictionary friends of Madeline's, that it would have been really awful to break it up.
Mhm.
And I guess you could say we won that argument. Saul, at that time, he's since died, and I don't know what has gone on with this, but when the backstory, I don't know if any of you knows this. The backstory is that Madeline's parents knew Warren Buffett
Right.
at the beginning of Berkshire Hathaway, had invested in Berkshire Hathaway very early on. And he was Meyer Kripke was was the rabbi at the conservative synagogue in Omaha, Nebraska. Um, uh, so he wasn't, I guess, in a sense, destined to be rich, but he ended up rich. And when he and his wife died, then that inheritance was split among their three children. And Saul took his money, and I can't say this without a smile. He took his money and he established the Saul Kripke Center at the City University of New York. But the idea was because he was one of those people who had more ideas and wrote more stuff that was never published, that they needed to come out with a published edition of all of his work, and that this center would be the vehicle for that. That's been disrupted, I think, probably because he's not available for anybody to consult on his work now. And if you've ever read any Saul Kripke work, you know it's heavily logical and it's not for the faint of heart. Yes, he needed to sit down and think about ways of presenting this so that maybe somebody else could understand what he was thinking about. But that was the way he used his money. Madeline used her money to build this collection. She was already a collector, but she was a collector on a much smaller scale. And the inheritance gave her the chance to really up her game, which she did. And I think that in the end, Saul did understand that what she had done was parallel to what he had done,
Mhm.
and that he needed to, he needed to find a home for that collection. So,
Well, and that actually is kind of a perfect segue to one of our other questions. Karen asked our first one, and she has the second one. With the collection, how do you keep it from just languishing on a shelf? How do you get it seen and out?
well, you're talking to the person who knows the answer to that question best, actually, because uh, part of the drama and the machinations that I mentioned is that I did promise that I would look after it, especially in its early years, and that I would promote it publicly. That was supposed to be, if you want to look at it this way, a selling point for bringing it to Indiana. And the blog was part of it. And the exhibition is part of that. And the symposium is part of that. And the lectures that were given in the symposium will end up constituting a special issue of the journal Dictionaries, so that it will go to people who have access to that journal. We'll do other stuff. We'll continue the blog, although the blog is really hard for the library to manage. I didn't realize that. I mean, somebody said early on, blogs are hard to manage. They are hard to manage, especially with the photographs, because I don't have access to the books. So I hand in posts. There are 4 of them with the library right now. And I just have to sit back and wait until somebody there has the time to get the photos done and then to get them up onto the university library's blog. Then something that I really, really wanted to do, and I don't want to offend the deeply, I don't know what the word is. I would have said conservative years ago. I'm not sure that's what it is now, if there are any in the group here. But I had hoped to do National Endowment for the Humanities sponsored workshops for school teachers and university professors. There were two separate programs that the NEH had for decades that supported those types of summer institutes for people to come and work in a library or a collection or whatever on a particular topic. And those have disappeared now from the repertoire of funded NEH activities. Now, I'm an optimistic person. And times have changed, you may have noticed, and they may very well change differently in the future, and those programs will come back. But that's another possible stage in what we'll do, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll do as much as we can to bring it to as many different people as we can. That's the best we can do.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like you have some people in the room would probably consider the coolest job in the world then is being sort of the person who is going to not manage the collection exactly, but make sure that the collection stays in the public eye and is useful.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, the terms of being a university professor, at least in Indiana, have changed a little bit over the last few years for political
Mm,
reasons. And,
mm,
dealing with the collection actually doesn't figure in my annual evaluation in any meaningful way. So I still have to do the rest of the work and more of it, maybe. So there's a little bit of a competition in my own professional life about attending to Madeline's work and attending to the other work that I have to do. But putting that aside, I think I'll be able to manage it. I'm 64, I'm not 94, and I get around pretty well, and I can get up in the morning early, and I can work late still. So I'll do my best to get the job done.
have you been a collector of dictionaries
No,
yourself? No?
I mean, I could pan around the room and you would see that there are shelves with
Oh, not a
dictionaries on
bunch.
them,
Yeah.
but I'm not a collector of them. I mean, I'll give you an example of something that's in the exhibit that is fascinating. It's a not a particularly interesting book by a guy named Alexander Gill. It's called the Logonomia Anglicae, which is an English word book. It is like many books about the English language written in the 17th century in Latin rather than in English. And it's not a particularly interesting book, I think. But Madeline managed somehow to collect the copy that had been owned by James I of England and James VI of Scotland. And we know this because I
Hmm.
was looking at it, trying to figure out some things we could put into the exhibition. And I looked at the cover, which is quite an ornate cover. And on it, besides a coat of arms, was the emblem of the Royal Order of the Garter. And if you know about English orders of chivalry, that's the highest and it's the most exclusive, and it's not something you would put on a book binding unless you were entitled to do it. It's just not, you couldn't get away with that. So I thought, well, this was owned by somebody who was a member of the Garter. Now all we have to do is go through all of the Garter members over the last few centuries and figure out whose it was. Then we tracked down the coat of arms, and it was the royal coat of arms. And then I was able to go back into the library's catalog, meaning the King's Library catalog, and discover that in fact this was a book that had once been in there. So I don't collect stuff like that. You have to have money, and you have to have time and access.
Mhm.
And I will say one of the things that I've really learned, I guess I should have known this before, it was good that she had the money and it was good that she had the free time that it supplied, because you have to go to rare book fairs and festivals, and you have to go to all kinds of sales, and you can do some of that online, but it's risky. You need to be there in person. It had never occurred to me how much time and care it would take to put together a collection like this, volume by volume, when items would be of that quality or that interest.
Mhm.
Right? But keep
Yeah,
your eye open all of the time.
I think it's easy to sort of the initial impression is that this is an eccentric woman who just hoarded a bunch of
Mhm.
dictionaries and questionable graphic illustrations, but but it's very much, she very much was a scholar. She was part of the community, the
Oh,
lexicographer.
she absolutely was. As a matter of fact, she was a founding member of the Dictionary Society of North America in the mid 1970s. She was at all of the meetings until the last one I hosted here in Bloomington in 2019. She was
Mm,
infirm and unable to make that, and then, of course, died soon thereafter.
mm,
So I knew her that way. I mean, I didn't
mm.
know her because I was one of those metropolitan people like Jesse Scheidlauer, just a few blocks up from the village, able to come down and look at her collection anytime she would let him in the door.
Mm.
Uh, uh, but I knew her and I knew about the collection, and she would tease me about items in it. And
She
so
would tease
she
you
was,
about, she
yeah,
would let you mean tease you in the sense that she would let you know of this interesting thing she had,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah. I had written, and I'm still writing. I haven't finished the newest article in this series, I guess you could call it, about the Dictionary of American English. And the marketing director at the University of Chicago Press decided when he heard that King George VI and Queen Elizabeth were coming to the United States in 1939, he said, "What a wonderful gesture it would be if we could give them a copy of the Dictionary of American English, celebrating, our special relationship with, two countries divided by a common language, or whatever Mencken said exactly." And it was a good idea. And it didn't go over at first because the Queen and King were not accepting gifts on the trip. It was redescribed as the sort of book that any gentleman would want to have in his library. They accepted that workaround, and they got a specially bound and plated copy of each of the 4 volumes of that dictionary. There are
I'm sorry, I don't know this dictionary. The Dictionary of
The
American
Dictionary of
English.
American English is a sort of Oxford English Dictionary style Dictionary of American English published between 1936 and 1944 in 4 volumes. The chief editor at first was William Craigie, who was one of the editors of the OED. He came to America to take charge of the project. And then a University of Chicago professor named James Hulbert was the other main editor. And other important people I won't mention because once I get started, I can't stop. We're involved in that project and are part of the whole story of dictionaries in the 20th century. But it's never been digitized, which is one of the reasons you don't know about it. And it went through a second printing in the 1970s, but those copies were bought up so quickly, and it hasn't been in print since. So nobody can really get hold of it. Well, anyway, the King and the Queen got the specially bound and plated set. The Roosevelts got a bound and plated set. William Craigie and James Hulbert got bound and plated sets. And I have seen the Roosevelt and the Royal sets. And I would run into Madeline at a meeting, or we'd be emailing, and she'd say, "When are you going to come to New York? I've got something that I think you would really like to see, something that you would want to own. I don't think I'm willing to sell it," she would say, "but this is something that you particularly really want to see." And I thought, oh, damn, she's got one of those sets, right? And I never went to see it, and I haven't found it yet, but I'm still looking
Oh.
for it whenever I go into inventory boxes, and this is going to be the big day, right? And I'm going to open up the box, and there they will all be with their special book plates and their special binding. Yeah, she was very much a part of the community. She was also, in this indirect way, a very important scholar of dictionaries. Not in least important because she shared this stuff with anybody who was interested. And she found out about their interests and then would try to unveil them into visiting her in the way she did me. But I never did visit her in her apartment. I'm the only one in that dictionary group who never actually went to the apartment and saw what it was like there. I will say quickly, though, one other thing, because you brought it to mind. We are doing a Madeline Kripke podcast, a limited series. Probably it'll be about 4, maybe 5 episodes. And one of the things you'll hear on that is a variety of these dictionary people talking about the experience of being in her apartment,
Oh,
which
excellent.
appears to have been just a wild ride, to say the least, and the way she would show works to them and things like that in her curatorial way.
Huh.
Yeah.
And where can we find that podcast?
Well, it'll have to be made first, and I haven't written
Okay.
the episodes yet. But we have a lot of recorded interviews, and it's an ongoing thing. And I'm hoping that we'll have it produced and out sometime next year.
Mhm.
Um, the earlier the better, as far as I'm concerned. Oh, because then I have a coffee table book to do
On this collection?
on this collection, and
Right.
then I have those NEH seminars to do if I get the opportunity to do it in the end.
Right. Right. Okay. So a lot on your plate. So this is going to keep it. Not only is it going to keep giving for quite a while, but it's going to produce things we didn't know about for quite a while. I
For
mean,
quite a while, I think. Yeah.
how did you put together this collection when you're early in the process of discovery? Did you just say, okay, we have enough here that it's interesting and we can put something on display?
Excuse me. Yes, and I've already had a complaint about the way it was done, and I think it's worth pointing that out because any selection of a couple hundred items, and it wasn't even that for us, from a collection that size would be a little arbitrary. I had a question from one of the librarians who had seen apparently more of the collection than I about why there hadn't been more of a particular thing, and my answer to that was I didn't know that it was there. So I can very well put it in. To which her response was, "You knew that it might have been an issue, so you should have gone looking for it." And to which my private response is, "I don't have all the time in the world, you know. I mean, sometimes I just have to go with what I can see, not with what I would like to see. But yeah, we will find new things for a very long time, and we'll also find in the great pattern of Western culture dots that we can then connect to other things as a result of this collection. And sometimes it'll be to teen culture of the 1950s. Sometimes it'll be to the Royal Library of James I. Sometimes it will be something like the wonderful copy of the Ramasayana that she has. The Ramasayana is a book about thugi, about thugs in India. They were a criminal element, and the British, trying to do a good thing, I suppose, decided to get rid of them. And Lord Henry Bentinck was the Governor General of India at the time, and he had a lieutenant named John Sleeman who was put in charge of ridding India of the thugs. Sleeman did that, but he did it in a sort of intellectual way by studying the thugs, by interviewing a lot of thugs, by getting some of them to turn state's evidence, so to speak, so that they didn't end up dead like a lot of the other thugs. And he wrote this book, Ramasayana, about the language of this particular, nobody quite knows, group of criminals, cult. It's complicated, and I'm not a specialist in that. She has this copy that Sleeman gave to Lord Bentinck with an inscription of thanks and a nice binding and everything. It's like British imperialism in one little package when you look at it. It's quite remarkable as an object. But that obviously isn't important just because it's a language book and it's a beautiful book and it's got interesting associations. It's because it represents something larger than itself in world history. So there's one dot, and we can draw from that dot forward into other things.
Mhm. So we'll certainly keep an eye on what's coming, and I think it's about 3.5 hours from my house to Bloomington. So
Oh,
yeah. So I'll be
nothing.
I'll be over to as things unfold. I'll keep coming back and because
Yeah, and
it's
I hope,
fascinating.
as I said, that I will give all of you the opportunity to come some other time to see some of the other stuff. Whether we can do the 8-pagers or not in a library where kids have access to the
Mm.
galleries, I'm not sure. But there are other things in the book collection certainly that we can pull out and make interesting to various viewers, and we'll do that to the extent that we can. Again, it's hard because the Lilly Library has lots of stuff. I've only mentioned some of the dictionary
Yeah.
collections. The librarians need that exhibition space for lots of other exhibitions about lots of other stuff that the library holds. So I have to be in there looking for my chance, just waiting. And then someday somebody say, "No, we have nothing scheduled for this gallery," and I'll say, "Let's do a whole exhibition." And that's how we'll get
Gotta
it
be
done.
ready to jump in.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been fascinating. It's been wonderful to talk to you, and this is very cool to geek out about this collection. This is
Yeah.
Sounds absolutely
You called the
amazing.
right geek in this case. I'm
Yeah.
always willing to do it.
All right. All right. Well, thanks very much. And I'm not sure we'll be back next month with another show because it's summertime and we may take a little bit of a break, but sometimes things come up and present themselves and we feel like we just need to get one going.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
with
and
that,
I'm an
we'll,
Adams MP at iu.edu, and I'm a
Mhm.
professor working in the public interest. So if you've got questions, any of you, don't hesitate to write with them. I'm happy to respond.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. All right. All right. We'll see everybody next time, whenever that is. And thanks for coming. And thank you, Michael.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yep. Bye-bye.